Today we're looking at Psalm 142. Again, just like yesterday's psalm, it's a psalm that's crying for deliverance, that he's making supplications, giving his list of what he needs to the Lord. And sometimes, like I said, we want the Maserati or we want, $1 million. But to bring our needs daily, that we need today for the Lord, is what supplication is. What do I need right now? We're learning also about supplication with Solomon. I'm starting to see that when he prayed for supplication, he prayed also very distinctly this and this, and he opened all those doors by saying, okay, if a stranger comes in, or if a man sins, or if the nation sins, if the nation this, if that, you hear, if there's repentance, supplication, and turning from their sin, from their wickedness, take them back. Remember, God is not obligated to take you back just because you sin and then turn to him and go, well, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. He could just as easily say, no, no, I'm done. Pull the plug. Thank you, good night. But he doesn't. He's no obligation to forgive. There's no law over him that says anyone who comes to you, except the law that he created with his own mouth. So he is backing Solomon. Pray with supplications. Pray not just your list, but that you want to be forgiven, and then strength for what you're wanting to do with your life or what you see you should do. I cried unto the Lord with my voice. With my voice unto the Lord I did make my supplication. Here's my needs. I poured out my complaint before him, and I'm not complaining about him. My complaint is with the world. I showed him my trouble. I'm not hiding my trouble. When my spirit was overwhelmed within me, then knewest my path. Thou knowest my path, and the way wherein I walked have they privately laid a snare. We've seen this before, people laying snares for them. I looked to my right hand, and beheld there was no man there. I cried unto the Lord, Thou art my refuge and my portion in the land of the living. In this land of the living, you're the one. This is something I'm going to meditate on today. You are my portion in the land of the living, not my job, not the money I bring in, not the stuff I can and cannot do. You are my portion. Attend unto my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are stronger than I. We've seen this in other Psalms where he talks about the evil ones and the enemies being stronger than they are. It's okay to admit you're stronger. These problems are overwhelming you. Attend unto my cry. Bring my soul out of prison, that I might praise thy name. The righteous shall encompass me, for thou hast dealt bountifully with me. He is a bountiful God. When we get to First Kings in a minute, we're going to see the bountifulness. It isn't just, okay, you get a nice, solid, middle-class lifestyle. He is bountiful. The king is bountiful, and his servants are bountiful. The nation is bountiful. We're going to see in a minute where at the time of Solomon, silver was like stones on the street. Cedar was as common as sycamore. Sycamore is a tree that grows everywhere, and anyone can cut down a sycamore tree, carve it up, and make yourself something. Cedar was as common as sycamore. And so we get this idea. Cedars are very strong and durable, but it's very expensive, wood that's not grown in the area, yet it's as common as a sycamore. So we're going to look at that in a minute. But this is a nice psalm about praying to God and doing supplications. It seems to fit where we are, ironically enough, in First Kings. Going to First Kings, this is right after Solomon has dedicated. He prayed this very good dedication prayer to God. And he isn't just, Lord bless us, thank you for this food, amen. He really gets into it, and I really like it. Go back and look over it. Hearken unto it. He sets it up about why he did this, why he set up the temple, that this was God's plan, that God saw this in the heart of David, and God wanted to move on it, but he couldn't do it through David. So Solomon is going to do this. And Hiram from David, Hiram comes in, and they establish this rapport, and they have servants that work back and forth. Again, many of these were not slaves. Many of them were bondsmen. Here, you work for this wage. You work for a month, go home for 2 months. And I believe that he paid them very well. I mean, if you ask a young man today, do you want to work for $50 an hour for a month? And they'd be like, yes, please sign me up. It would have been maybe that kind of bounty to this. Oh my gosh, yes, I want to go work for you. So we get the idea that in this prayer of dedication, that if a man trespass, or if the nation trespass, if a stranger calls out to you, if we see ourselves in trouble, if we see ourselves in famine, if we see ourselves in want, if we see ourselves where it's not raining and the ground is like brass, we know now that God is judging us for our sin. And if we return, if we go into captivity, worst case scenario, we know that God, because of his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is not going to wipe them out completely. But the worst thing you can think of is being taken out of your land, being pulled up someplace else, and dropped into captivity. And if you're in captivity and you remember what you did wrong, and you remember the type of God that you're dealing with, then you can call out to this God, and he will bring you back because of the promise of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Like I said earlier, we act like God owes us something, that God has some kind of rule over him that says, if they call out to you, you must forgive. He doesn't have to forgive. He could have just said, thump, you're out. But he promised that. He promised about this covenant he made, with himself, that I will keep my word. So I love how he did this. He really lines this out. This is almost like a covenant you would make, when you buy your house. The party of the first part, the party of the second part. You do this, we'll do this. Here's your escrow. Here's how much your monthly will be. Top property taxes and insurances and all this stuff. It's almost like that kind of covenant. He finishes that, and he finishes all of his building, and he built the king's house, and he started working around building Israel. He started setting this up. We'll see that he appears, and God warns him again in chapter 9 about I hear your prayer and your supplications, and I'm going to work this way. One warning: if you walk with me like David did, with integrity in your heart, not just in verbal, not just in voice, not just in keeping of feast and stuff, but you're actually from your heart. According to all of that I've commanded thee, keep my statutes and my judgments, I'll establish the throne forever, as I promised David. But if you turn away, if you or your children turn away from my commandments, but go serve other gods, then I will cut off Israel. He's warning them. See, when Solomon makes this prayer about captivity, he makes that in commentary on God saying, I will cut you off if you turn against me. He doesn't say I'll destroy you. I'll cut you off. And so here he has him that he's going to cut him off. He's warning that. It says, I will do it. And of course he does this with the Babylonians and with the Assyrians later on. But I'll cut him off, which have for this house, which I have hallowed. I have chosen to put my name here. You didn't put my name here. You didn't build this. I built it through you. I'm putting my name here. And he warns them that people will look at this. They'll look at this house. Look at this house that you made, this beautiful, wonderful thing that took 7 years to make, and that's covered in gold, and has all the pomegranates, and has all the trees and the lions, has, this courtyard, and all this that you've set up, has this brazen label, has all these water troughs and things. Then you have the epoch, and then you have all the beauty of the priesthoods and the garments and all this stuff that was from Moses, the time of Moses, that now gets put into this, and it's just beauty upon beauty upon beauty. But if you turn away from me, people will look at this and they'll hiss and they'll say it's a byword, and they'll say, what happened to these people? And the answer will be, they turned against Yahweh their God. So if this goes south, it's not because of your enemies, and it's not because of just time or bad luck or whatever. It'll be because of your national sin. So he's warning them about that. He says that they will become a byword, and even the people will know. In Isaiah or Jeremiah, it says, what other people have ever turned against their God? The Israelites were unique in the fact that they turned against their own God. These other worshippers of their gods stuck to their gods. They were faithful to their gods. Of course, their gods gave them everything they wanted, but they were faithful to their gods. So it says, and it came to pass at the end of 20 years. Now, we think that a lot of biblical things happen within a few months or a year or whatever. You're looking at 7 years to build it. And it came to pass at the end of 20 years that Solomon had built the 2 houses. So you get an idea that from the start to the finish was 7 years to complete. Then 14 more years had passed. And so he is doing all these things in this 20-year period. 20 years is a long time. He's growing this economy. Everything's getting better. Everything's getting stronger. He's branching out. He's becoming more powerful. We're going to see that in a minute. He gives Hiram some some cities up in northern Israel. He gives him some cities, but Hiram doesn't like those cities. He thinks they're kind of dirty. He doesn't really like them. They're not the cities of grandeur that he was kind of wanting. So there's a little problem there with Hiram of Tyre. And but Hiram sends him six score, which is 120 talents of gold. He builds a levee and he starts building a house. He builds more houses for his daughter, for his daughters, for his wives. He builds a house for the daughter of Pharaoh in a place called Milo. So she has her own settling, her own place. She has her own servants. She's taken care of from the king. She has her stuff brought in from the household of the king. You get the idea that that wife is more of a political wife than a real wife, but it seems to be everything's going okay here. Um, for the Pharaoh of king of Israel had gone down to take Gezer, and so there was a town in the south called Gezer, and Pharaoh took it from the Canaanites and then gave it to Solomon, and Solomon gave it to his daughter. I mean, to his wife, which was Pharaoh's daughter. And it talks about all the chariots that they had. It talks about the people, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, all these people that were left, that were Canaanites, became bondsmen. Now, again, slavery was not allowed, but creating a bondsman, these are the people who did the heavy lifting and the moving and the cutting of stones and the cutting of trees and the moving of things, and so they did all of that work, but they were in a bondsman relationship, not a slavery relationship. So they were bondsmen. Once again, if you don't like it, leave. Work for 6 years, you can take off. Work for however is established. You could establish monthly, or you could establish I'll work for you for 2 years, and then you could leave. Some people stayed forever and had bondsman attitude. And again, when we think about the economy that Solomon is making, I mean, your bondsmen are working, let's say hypothetically, for $20 an hour. And I'm thinking about our economy where most people make 15. Even the slaves, not slaves, but even the servants, the lower servants, are making really good wages at a very good bond price. So again, the higher the king goes up, the more the economy comes up to help the people. This is how people can buy cedars instead of sycamores. That silver was like, not something very thought of. It was like stones in the streets. We have Israel is this economic powerhouse of giving food to the nations around them and pulling in resources from other people who want to buy this food, plus people who want the wisdom of Solomon. They go in and give gifts to Solomon, which he gives to the economy of the people. He gives to the resources by which he might pay bondsmen a very good wage, from gold that's given to from this king, and silver comes from this king, and resources are given, as tribute from other kings. We're going to look at Sheba. She gives wonderful gifts to Solomon, and all of this becomes a trickle down. Imagine, you go up, and then as it goes down to the people. The problem with our economy is the resources are kept at the top and not filtered down to the people. That's the problem. But Solomon didn't do that. We're going to see later on when we get to Queen of Sheba that he lives in a type of royalty, a type of splendor that was unknown by the people of that time. He pimped his ride all the way up to the top. He had a throne that had 6 stairs to go to it, and he had lions up there, and he had this certain majesty. He had this throne was made of ivory and overlaid with gold, and he had these lions sitting up there. He was in charge. He was the king, and he lived like a king in royalty, and so did the people of Israel live like servants of the king, but yet they lived very well in this economy. He didn't keep it all to himself. He passed it downstream. When we talk about servants, but the children of Israel, he did not make bondsmen, but they were servants. Now, servants have a different wage. Servants have a little bit more freedom into what they can get. If you're in a house and it has a lot of dainties and a lot of gold and a lot of silver, a lot of that is for your use because you are the servant. You're different than a bondsman. So as a servant, you're up in a different class. And these people could become servants. All they had to do was proselytize in to Israel. This is a kingdom. and you need to be in a certain level. I mean, we hate to say it, we think we're free, but in America, we have certain levels of living that people choose to be. Some people want to live down here, some people want to live here, some people want to live up here. Finding where you're happy, finding where you want to be. And again, if everybody's paid really well, you get to choose your role. So he had these people were his princes, and they were captains and rulers of his chariots and his horsemen. They were the rulers of the area. Again, this was in peacetime. These were not people with slaves, cracking a whip and forcing them to go, build pyramids and all this kind of stuff. They weren't building these obelisks and building these things of worship to a foreign god or worship of a king, setting up royalty and majesty for him and him alone. When they built Israel up, it was for the betterment also of all of Israel, from up and down to Beersheba. They all benefited from the raising up of the king, and we see that's what's going to happen with Christ. And he built his Pharaoh's daughter a house in Millo, and Solomon did his burnt offerings and peace offerings, and he had a navy. This was amazing. Most people don't know that he had a navy. He would actually not just buy from the areas above them. He had a navy that went down. I brought a map here to show you. This is the land. Right up in this area over here, he had a little navy that he made, because here's Jerusalem. Right there near Edom. Edom's over here. And that went out through this strait down here. Here is Sheba. We're going to meet the Queen of Sheba. But this is the area of Sheba. And here's Israel. And so they had a navy that went through. And imagine you're going down into the Indian Ocean. And you go down and you trade with other nations. Any nation you can find. Any nation that wants to come in. And then the kings of other nations are coming up. You got people coming across. You got people coming down from the north. People coming from all areas to talk to Solomon. But he had a navy where he had these fleets going down. It wasn't just for protection. It was for mercantilism. It was for trade. Trading with other people. It says later on that he brought in anything he wanted. He brought in apes. He brought in peacocks. He brought in all kinds of fine spices, fine jewels. And this was stuff that trickled down to Israel, trickled down to the bondsmen. Even the bondsmen were living like kings in a sense, because of this economy that Solomon set up. So we have to see this, that's the wonderful thing about grid work, is you start seeing all these patterns, you see these connections, you start drawing these inferences that are not outside of the Bible, that God has blessed them. But it isn't just a blessing, it's not an overnight blessing. We're talking within a span of 20 years. This just doesn't happen. That's sometimes we Christians are guilty if we want the overnight. You have to work up to it. He had to build for 7 years, and he had to prioritize God. God's house, God's rules, keeping his commandments. Once you've got God in place, everything else will slowly get better and better. You can't look for that, that lottery ticket win, or, finding $1,000 on the street or something silly like that. But putting a little, elbow grease into it, putting your shoulder to the grindstone kind of thing, but yet it shows the fruit. And so we have this 20 years later, this very strong economy, this very strong navy. You're trading with other countries left and right. Kings are appearing, and ambassadors, and even a queen will go up and talk with him. And they're so astounded by what they see, they give tribute. They want to connect with this. This is a resource. I mean, if you've got something to sell, the world was on sale and Solomon was buying. That's just the end of the game. The world was on sale and Solomon was buying. And he just kept buying, and everybody prospered in this concept. So this is really good. Unfortunately, it won't last for long. I'm not trying to give any foreshadowings too much, but we know that this goes south, and it's too bad. They could have stayed here, but unfortunately the following kings would choose not to be wise kings. And that's the problem with America, is we have kings who are choosing not to be wise kings. But we need to be the ones who are wise, even if our kings are foolish. We need to be Abigails in a world of Nahors. Remember Nahor, who was the fool? But God blessed Abigail when she honored David. Who's David? David's the king. So don't worry about your leaders and the people over you who are fools. Honor the king. And Christ is a king like Solomon. He's not just a king like David. He's not just a priest like Melchizedek. He's also a king like Solomon. So make your supplications to that king. Call out to the king who's Solomon and get him on your side working for you because he wants to. He wants you to step away from your sin, honor him with statutes and responsibilities and commitments and commandments, not just for sin, since sin's taken away, but now we can honor him with our life. Anyway, see Christ as Solomon and take him your supplications and see what happens. Thank you.